Good afternoon, everyone. We are now on the record. The time is now 1:08 p.m. on Thursday, July 7th, 2022. This begins the videotape deposition of James McDonald, MD, taken in the matter of Richard Southwell et al. Versus Daniel J. McKee et al., filed in the state of Rhode Island, Superior Court of Providence, case number of which is PC 2021-05-915. The videographer today is Eden Rucker. The court reporter today is Nancy Karen. We are both representing Esquire Deposition Solutions. Counsel, will you please announce your name and whom you represent, after which the court reporter will swear in the witness.
Thank you. Attorney Gregory Picciarelli for the plaintiffs.
Christiane Pichkowski on behalf of the named defendants.
Etienne Shaw on behalf of the named defendants.
Okay, I have a stipulation for remote proceedings that I will read into the record. My name is Nancy Karen. I'm the stenographer today. For the record and to ensure a valid notary and certified court reporter is present at this proceeding, I'm a registered professional reporter and a notary public in Rhode Island, and my notary number is 18102. I'm going to read a stipulation for remote proceedings, and if at the end the parties could agree. It is hereby stipulated and agreed by all counsel present under the Rhode Island Supreme Court Executive Order regarding COVID-19 that this web-based remote proceeding is being conducted by parties in separate locations, that the oath shall be administered upon the witness providing a valid form of identification unless otherwise stipulated, that this remote proceeding is being recorded by video and audio means with prior consent of all parties, that exhibits may be presented and marked by counsel and provided to all parties prior to or at the time of questioning regarding said exhibit. All parties shall bear their own cost for this proceeding unless otherwise agreed upon. Do the parties agree?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, if the attorneys could now, before I swear in the witness, just go ahead and stipulate that, yes, we are waiving him showing the valid form of ID, and also waiving, I believe he's not in Rhode Island, that I am a Rhode Island notary that is going to swear a witness not in Rhode Island. If one of you could make that statement on the record.
Yes, I will stipulate that the witness need not produce an ID. We all know who he is, and also that you may swear him in as even though he's not in the state of Rhode Island.
Okay. If you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could state your full name and your present location for the record.
My name is Dr. James McDonald, and I'm located in the state of New York right now.
Okay, I am going to mute myself and the parties can begin.
Thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon, Dr. McDonald again. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Doctor, you were most recently the interim director of the Rhode Island Department of Health. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. You were appointed on January 27th of this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
When was your last day of employment in that position?
June 25th, 2022 at midnight.
Okay. And do you still consult with or work for the Department of Health in Rhode Island in any capacity?
Yes.
Okay. What do you do for the Department of Health now?
I'm the former interim director of the Rhode Island Department of Health.
Right, but my question was, do you still remain in some kind of employment capacity with the department? And I thought you said yes.
Yes, I did say yes.
Okay, so what do you do now? And since you left as interim director on June 25th, what's your current role?
Well, I was on time off, paid time off, and my current role is being on paid time off, with the exception of addressing this deposition.
Oh, I see. So your last day of work was June 25th, but you had some leave time so that you're still being paid by the department. Is that correct?
Yes,
When does that end? Approximately.
the end of this month.
Okay. But between June 25th and the end of July, you have no duties with the department other than being available for this deposition. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So you're not advising the department or acting as a consultant or anything like that, correct?
That is correct.
Doctor, did you do anything to prepare for today's deposition?
I met with the attorneys, Chrisanne, Mike Field, and Eddie Saab.
Did you review any documents in preparation for today's deposition?
No.
Okay. I have some exhibits that I'm going to be putting up on the screen that I'm going to be referring to. I've sent those to the attorneys at the Attorney General's office. Have you had an opportunity to review what I've sent them? Or have they forwarded them to you?
No.
Okay.
I just want the record to reflect that the exhibits were received at 12:17. Greg, if you would like me to forward them to him, as opposed to doing a shared screen or a combo, let me know and I can take care of that right
Well,
now.
let's try the shared screen and hopefully
Okay.
that'll be sufficient.
Okay.
And doctor, I don't know, have you done a video deposition like this before where you've had to look at documents on a shared screen?
Yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with the process.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so doctor, after you were appointed interim director, were you aware that the defendants in this case, your department as well as the governor's office, filed a motion to have the case dismissed as moot? Are you aware of that?
No.
You weren't aware of that at any time as interim director?
No.
Okay. The first document I'd like to put up, this is going to be, okay, come on. Okay, doctor, can you see this document on the screen?
I can see it now.
Okay, and the document is the filing. If you look up on the top left corner, it says May 11, 2022. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and it's a, I think my computer might be slowing down here. Sorry. So let me know if you have any problems viewing this or hearing. Okay, doctor?
Okay.
So it says defendant's notice of supplemental authority. Do you see where it's captioned that?
Yes.
All right. Now I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the first page. And there's a statement made in this document. The very last sentence, going over from the first page to the second page, it says, most notably, because a COVID-19 vaccine is now available for school children, it is at least unlikely, if not impossible, that a future state school mask requirement will be reimposed based upon the unavailability of a COVID-19 vaccine for school-age children. Do you see that statement?
Yes, I see the statement.
Okay. Have you seen that statement before today?
No, I have not seen that statement before today.
Okay. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, I agree with that statement.
Okay. Now, this statement was made on May 11th, correct? As I showed it to you. Do you understand that?
Yes, I understand that.
And we're, almost 2 months past that. Are you still in agreement that as of today, that statement is correct?
Yes, as of today, I believe that statement is still correct.
Okay. Okay, let's X out of that one and go to the next exhibit. Okay, Doctor. I put up on the screen another exhibit. It looks like it's on official Department of Health letterhead dated May 20, 2022. Do you see that?
Yes, I see this.
Okay. This letter or memo was sent. Again, I'm sorry, the computer's going slow here. So I scroll down to the bottom of the memo. There's a signature and it says James V. McDonald, MD, MPH. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is my signature.
Okay. You sent this memo on May 20th?
I don't know who sent the memo.
Well, it's addressed to Dear Rhode Island pre-K to 12 families. Did you draft this letter?
No, I did not draft this letter.
Who drafted it?
I don't know who drafted the letter.
Okay. But you signed it.
Yes,
Okay. Did you read it before you signed it?
yes,
Okay. Did you agree with everything that's in the letter or memo before you signed it?
yes.
And did you know who this letter was going to?
I don't know who it's going to other than what it says. I don't know the names of all the Rhode Island pre-K-12 families, so I don't know those people.
Well, why did you draft this letter or have it drafted on your behalf?
It's an educational letter. It's a memo.
Okay, why did you draft it?
It was to remind people of the recommendations that we had during the pandemic and how they have changed as we're in the endemic state. So it was reminding people about what the recommendations are.
Okay. Did you have an understanding of how this was going to get out to all of the families of pre-K to 12 students in Rhode Island?
I don't know how things get distributed to families from the department. No.
Well, it was your intention to have this memo go to every family in the state of Rhode Island that has pre-K to 12 students, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it was your expectation that somehow this memo would be sent through to some people who would then ultimately be able to forward it to all families in Rhode Island. Correct?
Yes.
So, and you know, not to be too cute about it, but I mean, quite frankly, the way I got it, a school administrator, a principal in a public school, forward this to all of the email addresses of all the families in her school. So presumably she got the email somehow from the Department of Health, sent to the school administrator who then sent it to the families. Does that make sense to you?
Objection, compound question, go ahead. Please answer, doctor, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's a public document. I just don't know how it gets distributed.
Okay. Well, are you aware that one way to get information to parents of school children is to use the local school's email server?
It's a possibility. I don't really get involved with how documents get distributed from my department to anyone. That's done through different people.
Okay. But you wanted this to get to every parent in Rhode Island of school-age children.
Yes.
Okay. And you drafted this on May 20th, correct, doctor?
Yes.
Objection, the doctor testified that he did not draft it.
Now, doctor, your testimony was that the intent of this was to remind people of recommendations. Do you see the word recommendation in this memo at all?
Yes, I do.
Where?
If you look at the 5th bullet, it says the CDC recommends an isolation period of at least 10 and up to 20 days for people who were severely ill with COVID-19 and for people with weakened immune systems. I can't see the rest of the memo, so I don't know if it appears otherwise.
All right, well, let's go back to the first sentence. It says, we are writing to remind you of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC's isolation protocol for those who test positive for COVID-19. Now, by we, are you referring to the Rhode Island Department of Health?
Yes,
Okay. And it says the word protocol, not recommendation, correct?
yes,
Why did you use the word protocol?
because this is a protocol.
What's your definition of a protocol?
It's generally a path of how to do something.
Would it be fair to say that you wanted people to think that was a requirement, not a recommendation?
No,
So you intended parents to read the word protocol to mean this is recommended, but not required?
no,
No, you did not. I'm sorry. Did you want the parents to interpret the word protocol to mean recommended?
no. I wanted parents to understand the word protocol to mean protocol.
Did you expect them to read that to mean required?
Objection asked and answered. Go ahead, doctor.
No, I did not expect people to read it to mean required.
Well, is a protocol something that is recommended or required?
Well, the answer to that is it depends on what the situation you're talking about is.
Okay. Let's go down to the first bullet point. Anyone who tests positive for COVID-19, even if they are vaccinated, must stay home and isolate for at least 5 days. Correct? Is that what it
Yes.
says?
Yes, that's what it says.
You see the word must there?
Yes, I see the word must.
Must means required, right?
Yes,
So your intent with this letter is to tell parents that they are required to do something,
our intent
right? Is that correct?
with this letter was to do what it says in the opening sentence, which was remind people of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention isolation protocol for those who test positive for COVID-19.
By the way, doctor, the CDC's isolation protocol, they don't call it a protocol, they call it recommendations, correct?
I don't have the document in front of me.
Okay, well, we'll get there. But getting back to the word must, so you agree with me that you're telling parents they must do something, it's required, correct?
No, we're not saying that. What we're saying is you have to look at the first sentence of the memo and that these are the isolation protocol. It was standard public health practice across the United States of America that since December of 2021, that people isolate for 5 days. We've changed at that point. We're just simply reminding people about this requirement, recommendation, call it what you will. But we're trying to remind people what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had changed across the country.
All right, doctor, the CDC doesn't issue mandates for isolation, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
The state of Rhode Island would be the entity, either through the Department of Health or the governor through an executive order, that could mandate someone stay home and isolate, correct?
Yes,
And in fact, there was a executive order mandating isolation under certain circumstances. That was in existence back earlier this year, correct?
that's too vague for me to answer.
All right, well, let me do this. I'm gonna add another document here. Bear with me.
Right, I'm still in the room. I just gotta get up for a second.
Yep.
Oh no, Greg, don't talk. Hold on. Something bad just happened. Did I just log out?
Nope. I think you're still there.
Can you still hear us? Greg, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I don't know if I can
Yep,
see.
don't know what happened. Hold on. Okay, we're back. Got it. It must have been when you were uploading the document. We're good now.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
I'm not sure. Can everyone, can you see the
I'm fine.
next exhibit 3, CDC quarantine and isolation?
I can see this document.
All right, so is this the document? This is updated March 30, 2022. Is this the document that you relied upon for writing your May 20th, 2022 memorandum?
I don't know if this is the document that was relied upon.
All right, well, let me let you scroll through it a little bit. Tell me if I'm going too fast. Does this look familiar to you?
Yes, this document does look familiar to me.
Talks about quarantining, when you should quarantine, what a quarantine is, why you should quarantine, what to do for quarantine, after quarantine. And then it talks about isolation, how that's different from quarantine. So this is this the document you relied upon in drafting your May 20th memo?
I mean, this looks like the same content that we would have used. I don't know if we actually looked at this particular document, but this is the content.
All right, and then I'll go back up to the beginning. I mean, it mirrors the recommendations or the statements you make in your memo about staying home for at least 5 full days, wearing a well-fitting mask, things like that, right?
In late December 2021, the Centers for Disease Control changed isolation from 10 days to 5 days, and then days 6 through 10 wearing a well-fitting mask. So that was the new standard public health practice for the whole country. The content that's in the document you're showing us here, Exhibit 3, which is dated March 30th, 2022, reflects the same content I recall from December 2021.
Okay. And again, this doesn't, nowhere in this document does it say this is mandated, correct?
I haven't.
Objection, doctor, please hold, just so I can get my objection on the record. Objection, the doctor has stated that it has not reviewed the exhibit in its entirety. We did not receive them until 12/17. Today, doctor, if you can answer, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I can't see every word of the document, so I don't know if the word mandated is in it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let me go to the next document, Exhibit 4. Okay, come on. All right, Exhibit 4. This is an executive order, 2206, dated January 19, 2022. Can you see this document, doctor?
Yes, I can see this document.
All right, I'm just going to scroll through it. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
All right. And if we scroll down to paragraph 5, you see where it talks about a student or staff member in preschool who tests positive for COVID-19 or is in close contact with a person who tested positive must comply with the isolation and quarantine requirements as applicable, including any monitor to stay quarantine program regarding the duration of the isolation or quarantine period, as well as the post-isolation or post-quarantine masking requirements in accordance with RIDOH's guidance for COVID-19 outbreak response in pre-K to 12 schools. And then it has a link. You see that?
Yes, I see that.
Now, back on January of 2022, this was a mandate from the governor through an executive order, correct?
Yes,
And then ultimately, this was renewed in February, but it was allowed to expire in March of 2022. Is that correct?
yes. My understanding is it was lifted March 4th, 2022.
Okay. So there is no longer a governor's executive order mandating masking requirements under any RIDOH guidance, correct?
Objection, timeframe, please, Greg.
Doctor?
I'm asking for the same question that the
Okay.
attorney Rakowski asked. What is the time frame you're referring to?
Sure. Since this executive order expired, there is no longer a masking requirement by a governor's executive order for post-isolation or post-quarantine in accordance with RIDOH's guidance. Correct?
Can you repeat that, please? I lost a little bit of it.
Sure. This requirement in paragraph 5 expired in March of this year, correct?
Yes,
And since then, since March of this year, there is no further governor's executive order that mandates this, correct? What's in paragraph 5.
yes, that is correct.
Okay. Is there any Rhode Island Department of Health mandate, either through regulation or some other document that mandates masking under
Excuse
these
me, Greg.
guidelines?
I'm sorry, somebody's not muted, so I'm hearing a lot of background noise.
Anybody who's joining, you must mute and keep your video off. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Greg. Go ahead. I
No,
apologize.
thank you for bringing that up. Okay, doctor, again. Since March of 2022, when this executive order expired, there's no Department of Health regulation which mandates the wearing of masks, post-isolation or post-quarantine, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
In fact, there's no Department of Health regulation mandating masks at all since March of 2022, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Going back to your memo, Exhibit 2, when you wrote the words, anyone who tests positive for COVID-19 must stay home, under what legal authority did you assert that that is a requirement that people stay home?
Objection, question calls for a legal opinion, to which the doctor is not an attorney. Doctor, if you're able to answer that question, please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't agree that this is a requirement. What this reflects is the standard public health practice across the United States issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's very consistent with the Exhibit 3 that you showed. These are the same concepts that are been discussed since late December of 2021 about isolation. But there's no enforcement authority of this memo. It's simply a memo. There's no way to enforce it.
Well, if I'm an administrator in a school and I get this memo and I'm told to send this to parents, and a parent says, well, I'm not going to follow this, would you expect the administrator to tell the parent, well, then your child can't come to school?
Objection calls for a hypothetical. Doctor, go ahead if you can.
I'm not, here to answer how school administrators will interpret. It's up to a school administrator to interpret how they would interpret things.
So so a school administrator reading the word must, you would expect them to interpret that to mean they have to do this, and if they don't, they can't come back to school.
Objection, same as the last. Doctor, go ahead.
Yeah, I've already said this is a memo. It's reflecting what was stated as a national accepted standard of public health practice from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I think that most school administrators recognize that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is the nation's leading public health authority. I think they would give credible weight to what it says there, but how they actually implement this is really up to a school administrator.
Well, let's go down to the third bullet, where it actually talks about wearing a mask. It says on days 6 to 10 of their isolation period, they, and I'm assuming you mean students, must wear a well-fitting mask. Is that correct?
It's correct. That's what the statement says.
Okay. Again, you use the word must there, correct?
Yes, the word must is there.
Right. And then in the next bullet, it says if students or staff are unable to wear a mask at school, they must isolate at home for the full 10 days following the positive test. You see that?
Yes, I see that statement.
So you're telling parents through school administrators that they either must wear a mask, and if they can't, they must stay home, correct?
No, what I said was we're reminding parents of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the nation's leading public health authority, on the isolation protocol for people who test positive for COVID-19. It's not an enforceable document from the Department of Health.
So you were just trying to mislead parents when you use the word must?
Objection argumentative. Doctor, go ahead. You can.
No, the Rhode Island Department of Health was not trying to mislead parents.
Were you trying to trick them into thinking they must do something even though you had no legal authority to tell them they must do it?
Objection, same and compound. Go ahead, doctor.
No, the intent of the memo is clearly stated in the first sentence. We're reminding people of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's isolation protocol for those who test positive for COVID-19. There's no attempt to trick or deceive or coerce anyone. It's simply just telling people what was the national standard. I think we would all agree over these last 2.5 years, there's a lot of information for parents to process, a lot of information for parents to understand. One of the functions of the Rhode Island Department of Health is to educate the public, specifically Rhode Islanders, about what are national standards. That's all this memo is intending to do. It's not an enforceable document. It's simply a memo.
Well, doctor, you would agree with me that giving clear, understandable advice to the public is an important function of public health officials during a pandemic or an epidemic such as COVID, correct?
Yes, I agree.
It's important to be straightforward with people, not to mislead them about public health issues, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So explain to me how it is straightforward and clear to a parent who's reading this memo that what they're being asked to do is a recommendation. It's not a mandate. Because it seems to me any average parent reading this is going to read this to say, I must do this under some penalty if I don't.
Objection form calls for a hypothetical. Compound. Doctor, go ahead if you can.
I think the intent of the memo is really clear, and it's in the first sentence. And rather than repeat that again, I think it's very straightforward. This is not new information. This is the same information people have been hearing for quite some time. What we simply tried to do was put it in one place because, quite frankly, people were getting a lot of information, and make sure people knew what was the new recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control. I don't think it's confusing. I don't think it's coercive, and I don't think there's anything that's unusual about it. I think it's just reiterating the same content you showed in Exhibit 3 from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
I think you just said that make sure that people do what they must do. Is that what you just said?
Maybe the court reporter could read back what I just said.
Okay. You don't recall what you just said?
I simply asked if the court reporter would be willing to read it back.
Doctor, this is my deposition, not yours.
I understand, but
Okay, let's move on, doctor. So it is your testimony that a parent of average, understanding and awareness, reading this memo, would understand that even though you say the word must, it really means recommended. You don't have to. Is that your testimony?
Objection, same as the last. Go ahead, doctor.
Yeah, yes, it's clearly recommendations. There's nothing enforceable about this. It's simply a memo. It's not a rule. It's not a regulation. It's not a law. It's not an executive order.
By the way, if you read on this page, I see the word must 4 times. Do you see that?
I'm looking at the memo right now to identify all the times the word must is there. I see it in the first bullet. And then I'm looking to see where it is again. It looks like it's in the 3rd bullet. Looks like it's in the 4th bullet. And it's in the 6th bullet.
Right. So you use the word must 4 times in this memo, correct?
At least in the part I can see. I don't know if it's used below where the
No,
screen
that's
is.
it. There's nothing further. There's nothing further after that. Okay. So you used the word must 4 times, and it is still your testimony that what you intended to convey to parents was that this was recommended, not mandated.
If you
Objection,
read,
same. Go ahead, doctor.
yeah, as I've said before, if you read the top sentence, we're simply reiterating what has been advanced by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's not a rule. It's not a regulation. It's not a law. It's not an executive order. It's simply a memo. It's simply not enforceable. This is reflecting upon people what is the nationally accepted public health practice.
Okay, I'm going to move on here. I'm going to put up Exhibit 5. Okay, doctor, can you see this document? It says memo. It's dated May 19, 2022.
Yes, I see this memo dated May 19th, 2022.
Again, I'll scroll through for your benefit. And let me know, have you seen this document before?
Yes, I have seen this document.
Okay, it's 2 pages. It's unsigned.
Greg, while the doctor takes a look at that, real quick, I have been advised that I am to object to the questions with respect to the May 19th memo as outside of the scope. Could I have a standing objection with respect to this line of questioning as opposed to doing it each time?
I'd prefer that.
Okay, just with respect to, this memo. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that you don't do it every time.
Don't interrupt, Greg.
So again, doctor, this memo, as you see on the top, there's no signature or no one that says who from the Department of Health sent this memo, correct?
That is correct.
And if you scroll down to the bottom, again, there's no signature, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, what it does at the bottom is if you have a question, you have to contact this generic email address, rido.covidk12questions@healthri.gov, correct?
Yes, that's exactly what it says.
Do you know who monitors that email address?
I do not know the names of the individual who monitored that email address.
Do you know what department they work in?
They work at the Rhode Island Department of Health.
Is there some special section of that department that they work in? Communications, something?
Yes, there is a special section.
And what's that section?
It's the COVID section.
COVID section. Who's the head of the COVID section?
Right now or at a different time?
Well, on May 19th of this year.
At that time, it would have been Christine Campagna.
Christine Campagna. And what is Christine Campagna's position?
Right now or then?
On May 19th.
She was the head of the COVID unit.
Is it just called COVID unit or is there some other official name?
There might be another official name. I'm just used to calling it the COVID unit.
Okay. And so is she the director of the COVID unit?
She was the head of it. I don't know what her official title was.
All right. Are there Who else is in this COVID unit?
When are you referring to? What time frame?
I'm sorry, again, May 19th.
At that time, there was probably close to 300-400 people in the COVID unit. So I don't know all their names. I didn't meet everybody.
I got you. Okay, do you know who drafted this memo?
No, I don't know who drafted the memo.
Were you aware that this memo went out on May 19th, 2022?
Yes,
Okay, how did you become aware of that?
I don't remember.
Did someone have to present it to you for your approval before it went out?
No,
So this Christine Campagna had the authority to send this memo out or have her department send this out without running it by you first?
I don't know who is the one who approved it.
Well, when did you become aware that this memo went out?
I don't exactly remember.
Was it before or after May 19th?
It was after May 19th.
Okay, how did you become aware of it?
It was part of this new line of litigation.
So the first time you heard about it was when litigation started? Or some legal filing that I made on behalf of the plaintiffs? That's the first time you heard of it?
Yes, I mean, I was aware of the concepts of the memo and aware that we were communicating, but you asked if I had actually seen the final memo, and the answer was no, I had not.
Okay. Since you became aware of it, did you inquire as to who in the Department of Health authored this memo?
No,
Do you know now who authored it?
no.
I was told by attorneys at the Attorney General's office that they communicated with Bruce Tedesco about this memo. Do you know who Bruce Tedesco is?
Yes,
Okay, and who is he?
right now?
Back
Or
on May 19th.
On May 19th. And May 19th, there's one of the attorneys who worked at the Department of Health that had many responsibilities.
I was told that Bruce Tedesco was looking into who drafted this memo, and I was told that it was a collaboration of 4 different people. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Okay, so you don't know who these 4 people might be?
No.
I was also told that I was going to get this information from the attorneys at the Attorney General's office, but then they changed their mind and refused to tell me who these 4 people are. Are you aware of that?
No.
Do you think I have a right to know who wrote this memo?
Objection, argumentative. Go ahead, doctor.
You know, I really don't think you have a right to know who wrote the memo,
Why not?
because ultimately I'm responsible for what comes out of the Department of Health during this time frame because I was the director. So I'm the one who's responsible for the content. I'm a leader. I accept leadership responsibility. People who work for the department are aligned with my leadership principle. Everything in this memo comports with leadership concepts I've talked about. And the content that's in the memo simply reflects what we're new as far as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention community level. So because Center of Disease Control and Prevention changed their guidance in the end of March 2022, this memo just simply refreshes that with people. So I think it's a very helpful memo. It's just meant to remind people of how we're approaching, and that's what's in this subject. In other words, mitigation strategies for high COVID-19 community level. This is just an educational document. It's meant to be helpful, meant to be informative, and I think it is. So I think who actually wrote it, really, quite frankly, isn't that critical for you to know.
As part of this renewed round of litigation, you're aware that the City of Providence reinstituted a mask mandate shortly after this memo came out. Correct?
I learned about it through the media that the City of Providence did this.
Okay. And you were aware that that prompted a new round of litigation. We were going to have a hearing on a temporary restraining order. You were going to have to testify at that hearing, but then that hearing got canceled. You're aware of all that?
I really am not aware of all that. I did, the attorneys would have handled much of this, so I quite frankly wasn't aware that there was new litigation. And I wasn't aware that I was going to testify.
Okay. As part of that new round of litigation, I was in communication with an attorney from the Rhode Island Department of Health, a gentleman by the name of Anthony Catone. Do you know who Anthony Catone is?
Greg, it's not Department of Health. I think you mean RIDE.
I'm sorry, I meant Department of Education, Rhode Island Department of Education. He's a lawyer for the Rhode Island Department of Education. Do you know who he is? Anthony
I do.
Catone? I'm sorry?
I do not know who Anthony Catone is, and I cannot verify that he's an attorney, and I cannot verify that he works for the Rhode Island Department of Education.
Fair enough. I was told by Attorney Catone that there is a K-12 working group, which includes the Rhode Island Department of Ed's Deputy Commissioner, Kelvin Roldan, and Associate Chief of Staff, Maureen Dizon, that meets at least once a week and includes representatives of both RIDOH as well as the governor's office. Are you aware of this K-12 working group that meets between Department of Ed, Department of Health, and the governor's office once a week?
No, I'm not aware of the frequency of their meeting. It's possible it's true. I have no reason to doubt it, but I don't really know. I'm not that granular at the department level. As the interim director, I really wasn't that granular about who was meeting with who and how often.
Doctor, you testified that, the buck stops with you, right?
It does, but I don't micromanage. So if you're telling me that people from the Department of Health met with the governor's office and met with the Rhode Island Department of Education, I have no reason to doubt it, but I'm not aware of these meetings, no.
Okay. Do you happen to know who the deputy commissioner is, Kelvin Roldan?
No, I don't know who this person is, and I can't verify their title or their place of employment.
Okay. So you're not aware of anything having to do with a K-12 working group that involves Department of Health employees?
I don't really micromanage at the department. If you're telling people met, they may have met. I just don't know how frequently they did it or what they discussed, but it sounds like something that is legitimate. It sounds like something that could have happened, but I'm not that granular. I don't micromanage. I don't know what the sum and substance of what they talked about was.
Doctor, I'm trying to be very specific. Are you aware of a K-12 working group?
So I know inside the Rhode Island Department of Health, there was a K-12 work group. I just don't know who they met with and how often they met.
Okay. And who was in this K-12 working group in the Department of Health?
I don't know.
Was Jamie Camella one of the people involved in this K-12 working group?
Jamie Camilla does work for the Rhode Island Department of Health, and she was involved with K-12, so she certainly could have been involved with a working group.
Okay. Back on May 19th, what was Jamie Camella's position with the Department of Health?
I don't know what Jamie Camilla's position was.
Do you know who she is? I mean, have you met her?
I know Jamie Camilla very well. I've met her numerous times.
Okay.
I just don't know the official title of her position.
Right. If I told you her title as related to me is Director of Epidemiological Operations at RIDOH's COVID-19 unit, does that refresh your recollection as to what her title might be?
It's possible that's her title. I just don't know what her title is.
Okay. I was also told by Attorney Catone that it was Jamie Camella who was most responsible for communicating to RIDE about this May 19th memo. Were you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that, but it doesn't surprise me. It could very well be true.
So today is the first time that you've heard that.
I really don't know who authored the memo. As I said previously.
That's not the question I asked, Doctor. I said, I was told that Jamie Camella was the person most responsible for communicating to RIDE about this May 19th memo. And I'm asking you, did you know that on May 19th?
No, I did not know that on May 19th.
When is the first time you learned that since May 19th?
Objection form. Go ahead, doctor.
You just said it a few minutes ago. As I said before, I really didn't know who wrote the memo.
Okay, so before I just said it to you right now, you did not know whether or not Jamie Camella was the person most responsible for communicating to Rod about this memo.
That's correct. And I mean, I'm assuming what you're telling me is true, but no, I didn't know.
Well, you don't have any reason to doubt that an attorney, the head attorney for the Department of Education, would tell me something that's not true.
I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't be saying something that is true.
He also wrote to me that this memo, this May 19th memo, should be interpreted as recommending that school districts located in high-tier communities mandate the wearing of face masks while in school.
Greg, is there a way to identify when this was? Is this something that we were copied on? I'm just trying to get a time frame here, and if I knew about it.
It's in my memo to the court demanding this deposition that you objected to.
Okay, so it's that attachment. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify. I didn't have it in front of me. Thank you.
I quoted the email verbatim in at least one of my legal filings in the last couple of weeks.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I just didn't recall it. Thank you.
Okay, let's get back to it again. Doctor, I was told by Mr. Catone, Anthony Catone, the attorney for RIDE, that Ms. Camella stated to RIDE that this memo, this May 19 memo, should be interpreted as recommending that school districts located in high-tier communities mandate the wearing of face masks while in school. Were you aware of that on May 19th, that Ms. Camella was telling RIDE that statement?
Objection form. Go ahead, doctor.
No, and I have no reason, I have no way to verify the veracity of your statement.
Would it be within Ms. Camella's power to communicate to RIDE that school districts should be mandating masks?
No.
So she'd have to get the approval of someone else in the Department of Health to make that statement to someone at RIDE.
Yes.
And would that person be you?
This is, it'd have to be me, but it'd have to be more than me. Quite frankly, if we're going to mandate something, it'd have to be a regulation. So it'd have to be done through the Director of Health and the Governor's office. So I alone don't have that authority.
Okay. Well, just to be clear, she's not saying that the Department of Health will be mandating masks. What I've been told is that she was telling school districts that they should mandate masks. Do you understand the difference?
Objection form. Go ahead, doctor.
I really don't understand the difference because quite frankly, this is a memo. There's nothing in this memo that looks like it's a requirement. So quite frankly, I'm not sure how to respond to what you're suggesting here.
Well, let's look at this memo and let's look at the first bullet point. And actually the sentence right before it. It says, in line with CDC recommendations as outlined in the pre-K to 12 outbreak response playbook, RIDOH recommends that schools and counties in CDC's high tier take the following mitigation steps. And the first one is implement universal indoor masking policies. Do you see that?
Yes, I see the statement you just referred to.
Okay. Again, person of average intelligence reading that, I would read that to say implement a mask mandate. Would you agree with that?
Objection form calls for speculation. Go ahead, doctor.
No, I don't interpret it the same way you interpreted it. It's clear. It's very clear. It uses the word.
What's clear about it? What's a universal indoor masking policy?
It's the sentence above that's clear.
Shit.
Doctor,
In
what
line
is a
with
universal indoor masking policy?
Greg, you just cut out. Can you please restart that question or have the steno read it back? You completely cut out on our end.
Okay, I'll start again.
Thank you.
And I may have been talking over you, doctor, and I apologize if I was. Let me start again. How do you define universal indoor masking policies?
Yeah, so the sentence above it is clear. It says, in line with the Centers for Disease Control recommendations, as outlined in the pre-K through 12 output response playbook, RIDOH recommends that schools and counties in CDC's high tier take the following mitigation steps. Implement universal indoor masking policies is what it says. This is simply reiterating what the Centers for Disease Control came out when it went into end of March of 2022. The CDC came out with its community levels. It's referenced in the hyperlink in the 2 paragraphs above. These are clearly recommendations. And so I don't see anything here that looks like the word mandate or anything that looks like the word requirement here. So it's simply recommendations.
So if the Providence School Department and the Commissioner of Education, who's running the Providence School Department, interpreted universal indoor masking policies to mean mask mandates, they would be wrong.
Objection, compound, cause for speculation. Doctor, go ahead.
I don't know how, schools require a lot of things, and schools interpret our guidance through the lens of how they see the school district they have there. So a school superintendent can interpret our guidance and decide how to implement it as best they see fit. That's up to the school administrator. It's not up to us.
I'll ask the question again, Doctor. The Superintendent of Schools in Providence and the Commissioner of Education, who runs the Providence School Department, if they interpreted universal indoor masking policies to mean mask mandate, would they be right or would they be wrong?
Objection, form, cause for speculation. Doctor, go ahead.
Yeah, as I just said, it's really up to the
Doctor, don't just answer the question. Would they be right or would they be wrong?
Objection, same as last.
We have 2.5 hours that we've agreed to here. If we're going to waste time going over and over this, it's going to cut into that 2.5 hours unfairly. I haven't brought that up yet, but I'm going to bring it up now.
Is
So I'm
that to
going
me?
to ask you again, Doctor.
Oh,
Would the superintendent and the Commissioner of Education be right or wrong in interpreting universal indoor masking policies to mean mask mandate?
objection, same. Doctor, if you can.
it's clearly not a mask mandate.
Okay, they would be wrong, correct?
It's not a mask mandate. You are correct. It is not a mask mandate. Absolutely right. It is not a mask
Thank you.
mandate.
So, Doctor, thank you. So if Jamie Camella had told anyone at the Department of Ed or any school superintendent that you should interpret that statement, universal indoor masking policy, to mean mask mandate, Jamie Camella would be wrong.
Objection, same as last. Greg, you cut out again. Doctor, if you can answer.
It's clearly not a mask mandate.
Okay. By the way, is Jamie Camella still working at the Department of Health?
Yes, as far as I know.
Have you had any discussions with her between May of this year and today?
Not that I recall.
Okay. All right, I'm going to switch now to Exhibit 6. Let me get rid of some of these other exhibits. I apologize, my computer's going slow. I'm trying to get Exhibit 6 up. Okay, here it is. Doctor, who is Dr. Philip Chan?
Dr. Philip Chan has many roles. One of them is a consulting medical director to the Rhode Island Department of Health.
So is he technically not an employee of the Department of Health?
Dr. Chan is a contractor with the Rhode Island Department of Health.
So like a 1099 contractor, not a W-9 employee.
I don't actually know the difference well enough to say the difference between a 1099 and an employee. I just know he's referred to as a contractor. I don't know how much he gets paid or how he gets paid or how often he gets paid.
Okay. Fair enough. Has his position changed at all since May 19th? As far as
Not-
you know?
Not as far as I know.
Okay. Does Dr. Chan have the authority to make statements publicly on Department of Health policy?
Sometimes he does represent the department. Sometimes he represents himself.
Well, for example, doctor, do you recall when the governor made his announcement that the mask mandates were ending? That was around March 4th of this year. Is that correct? As best you recollect?
Actually, if I recall, it was actually before then, as I was at a press conference with Governor McKee, and I believe it was actually at the State House, but I want to say it was at least a week before he made that announcement.
Okay. Well, do you recall that there was another press conference around March 4th that Dr. Chan stood in for you because you couldn't make it? Talking about cases and hospitalizations and the new tiered levels and what they meant.
That may have been the case. I don't recall it specifically, but it sounds something that could have happened. Sure.
Okay. By the way, doctor, what happened around that time, February, March of this year, in terms of the CDC guidance regarding masking? There was a change, correct?
Yes, there was a change.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the change was instead of just looking at cases, the new metric was to look at hospitalizations. Is that right?
That's actually not right. It was not
Okay,
until
correct.
the end of March 2022 that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention came out with the community levels of transmission. So we were in this situation before where they had substantial, low, substantial, moderate, and high. And then that changed officially, if I recall correctly, March 24th, 2022, where they went to a low, medium, and high. And in that community levels of transmission, that refers to what you were talking about, where it was a certain case count per 100,000 per population, but also number of people being admitted, and then how many people in your hospital due to COVID.
All right, so the low, medium, and high tier, what information goes into determining whether you're in the low, medium, or high?
One of the metrics is number of cases per 100,000 per week. So if you're more than 200 cases per 100,000 per week, that's one of the metrics. A second metric is what percentage of number of people being admitted based on the population. And the third metric is the percentage of your hospital beds that are occupied by people with COVID.
Okay. Now, on around May 23rd, 2022, in Exhibit 6, there was a story on WPRI. I believe it's not on this exhibit. I couldn't get it to print from the internet, but I believe it's an article written by a Melanie Da Silva for WPRI. And in this article, she quotes Dr. Chan. This article was about Central Falls reinstituting a mask mandate for their schools.
Excuse me, Greg, before you proceed,
Yeah.
do you have the title of this exhibit and or the date?
Yeah, so it's a May 23, 2022
Thank you.
article on WPRI website. The author of the article, again, it doesn't appear on here, but her name is Melanie Da Silva.
Yep. Is there a title?
Okay. I'm sorry?
Do you have a title?
Title of the article?
Yeah, it's not on here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Central Falls. I thought it's on there. I thought it's Central Falls reinstitutes mask mandate. I think something like that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I cite this in my brief, my legal brief.
Thank you.
So about, partway down this article, um, there's an interview with Dr. Chan, or a statement from Dr. Chan. And do you, I've scrolled down. Do you see where it says Dr. Philip Chan, the consulting medical director of Rhode Island Department of Health, told 12 News last week at this time RIDOH is aligned with CDC guidance. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
Okay, and then he goes on to say, and this is quoted, I haven't taken Dr. Chan's deposition yet to confirm whether he agrees that he said this, but for now, let's assume that he did, okay? And he says, we certainly agree with that when our community levels are high, like they are now, that people should mask when they're indoors. But we're not going to be mandating it. We strongly recommend it, but at this point in the pandemic, certainly as we learn to live with the virus, it's really up to people to make their own personal decisions. You see that statement?
Yes, I see that statement.
Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, I agree with that statement.
Okay. Did you agree with it back on May 23rd?
Yes,
Do you agree with it today?
yes,
Right. Doctor, let's see here. I want to get this back to normal. There we go. All right. So, Doctor, since you became the interim director of health towards the end of January of this year, have you had any discussions with anyone at either Department of Health or in the governor's office regarding reimposing mask mandates once they expired in March?
no,
Okay. Can you think of any circumstance under which you would recommend that the Department of Health or the governor reimpose a mask mandate in the state?
Objection calls for speculation. Doctor, go ahead.
yes.
And what would those circumstances be?
If there was a new disease that was spread primarily through respiratory droplets and it was highly contagious and caused significant morbidity and mortality, then I would recommend to the governor to consider that.
I think, Doctor, you recall at the very beginning of this case, when you testified at a preliminary injunction hearing back in October of last year. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do recall that.
Yeah. And I recall your testimony at the time that the reason COVID-19 was a pandemic were basically three things. One, that it was novel. Nobody had ever had the disease before. Two, that there were no treatments, known treatments at the time. And three, that there was a fear that hospitals would be overrun with sick people and that could have a very bad health impact on the population. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree that those were the three factors that made COVID-19 a unique pandemic or a novel pandemic?
Yes,
Would you agree with me that COVID-19 is no longer a novel pandemic?
yes,
And because A, many people have now gotten the disease, probably over 3/4 of the population, correct?
yes,
Two, we have some very effective treatments, be it the vaccine or other therapeutics, correct?
yes,
And in fact, as of just recently, at least in the United States, anyone can take the vaccine. As a child as young as 6 months old can take it, correct?
yes,
Okay. And third, there's never been an overwhelming of hospitals in Rhode Island, correct?
well, that's false.
When was there an overwhelming of hospitals to the point where people were not being treated and dying?
Martin Luther King Day weekend, 2022.
So there were people who were not being treated in hospitals and dying because of COVID-19 back in January of this year?
You asked if the hospitals were overwhelmed. I answered they were overwhelmed Martin Luther King Day weekend, 2022. I don't know how many people may have suffered adverse health consequences or may have passed away because of that. I don't know. What I do know is the hospital's overwhelmed Martin Luther King Day weekend of 2022.
Were they overwhelmed because of COVID patients or for some other reason?
Yes.
What percentage of patients were COVID patients on Martin Luther King weekend?
I don't know, but with that Martin Luther King Day weekend was by far the highest number of cases we've had in the state during the entire pandemic.
Okay. Well, just because there are cases, how about hospitalization? Was it the highest number of hospitalizations?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But since then, hospitalizations for COVID have gone way down, right?
Yes.
In fact, this is going to be a new exhibit that I did not send out earlier. I'm going to mark it as 11. It's going to be, it's an email from Anna Marie Beardsworth dated June 10, 2022 to Dr. Andy Boston. Hold on, let me see if I can share it. Okay, does everybody see it?
Not yet, Greg. Give it a second. Got it up.
Okay, doctor, can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
So Anna Maria Beardsworth, is she someone who works in the communications for RIDOH?
Yes.
Yeah, she works with Joseph Wendelkin.
Yes.
So she had the authority to send this email out on behalf of the department to someone from the public who was asking for information, correct?
Yes.
And in this email, the request was by Dr. Boston to get information regarding hospitalizations from February 13th to June 4th of this year, a 16-week period. Do you see that?
I see that.
Okay, and he asked that it be broken down. I'm not going to get into how he wanted it more granular than this, but ultimately what he was provided was a breakdown under 18 and over 18. Do you see that?
Yes.
And for this 16-week period, do you see where the under 18 group, 0 to 17, there were 43 COVID hospitalizations over a 16-week period? You see that?
Yes.
Hospitalizations where it was the COVID was primary or contributing was 21. You see that?
Yes.
So that would mean that in that 16-week period, under 2 hospitalizations per week in Rhode Island for pediatric COVID infections, right?
Yes.
Okay. And over 18, the primary and contributing hospitalizations were 592 over that 16-week period, correct?
Yes.
That's about 37 a week. I did the math. You trust me?
Sure.
So 37. Do you know how many hospital beds there are in Rhode Island during that period of time?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Do you remember when you were testifying back in October, you had a whole bunch of dashboards and NEDOC documents that showed overcrowding of hospitals? Do you remember all that?
Yes.
I recall that there were about 2,000 hospital beds in Rhode Island back then. Does that sound about right?
It does sound about right.
So 37 in a week, so that's less than 2% of hospital beds were being occupied by COVID patients during this 16-week period. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. I will get that, I'll get that document to you, Chris-Ann.
Thank you.
So let's get back to when you might think there would be a mask mandate reimposed. Would you agree then that there's no circumstance under which you would be recommending a mask mandate for COVID-19 going forward from today?
Oh, yes, I would agree. Regarding COVID-19, I would agree. Yes. I mean, unless we get a variant of high consequence, then that would be something we'd have to evaluate if that happened.
Well, as I understand it, and again, I'm just a layperson here, but reading what I see on the internet, which is always risky, there's some variants of Omicron, B2, B3, B4, is that right?
There are subvariants of Omicron. The predominant one in the United States right now is B5.
B5, or B5, okay. Do you envision a circumstance where one of these variants of Omicron could be serious enough that you would be recommending mask mandates going forward?
Objection form calls for speculation. Doctor, go ahead.
If we're limiting the question to known variants of Omicron, then I don't foresee a situation where we'd recommend a mask mandate to the governor.
Well, are there variants that may occur that you would recommend mask mandates be reimposed if a new variant came along?
Objection form calls for speculation. Doctor, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I alluded to earlier is if there is a new disease that happens related to COVID or not, or a variant of high consequence, then it would be something we'd have to think about.
Okay. So again, there could be a Omega variant of COVID, which could lead to a situation where you would be recommending the reimposition of a mask mandate.
Yeah, so not to put too fine a point out, but when I talk about a variant of high consequence, that has a specific meaning according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, World Health Organization, and it means it's a variant of high consequence means the vaccines don't work, the treatment doesn't work, and you're really back to starting with a brand new system. So that's what a variant of high consequence means. So I'm trying to explain, that I think this is extremely unlikely. I don't think it's going to happen. But if we're in a situation like we were in the beginning, then that would be when I would say we'd have to recommend something to the governor to consider.
Okay. Now, would you, have you thought about what the process would be to reimposing a mask mandate?
Objection form. Greg, are we asking these all in hypothetical since the doctor's not working for the state anymore?
Sure.
Okay, so if we are, can I have a running objection with respect to that?
Certainly.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
No, I haven't thought about it because I think it's highly unlikely we're going to have a mask mandate again. So I haven't given any thought.
Well, doctor, you don't think there's going to be a mask mandate for COVID-19, but you've admitted that there could be a variant that's immune to the vaccine, or there could be another COVID-22 could come along, or some other disease could come along that would require the imposition of a mask mandate, right?
Yeah, what I said was if there's a new disease that, quite frankly, masking would be an effective public health strategy, then that would be something we'd have to consider a mask mandate. But since, like I've said before, I think it's so highly unlikely that no, we haven't given any thought to how we would implement a new mask mandate.
So what would be the process by which the Department of Health should go about implementing a mask mandate if one was needed in the future?
You're speaking about a hypothetical situation that hasn't occurred, and presumably it would be something novel and new, and if it required a state of emergency, then so be it. It would go through the same process as the pandemic did. But you're asking me to speculate in something that isn't foreseen, it certainly isn't expected. So this was sometimes referred to as a once in 100-year pandemic. So quite frankly, it's hard to speculate about what this would look like.
Well, doctor, it's hard to speculate, but do you recall during the hearing back in October, I asked you why the Department of Health didn't go through its normal regulatory process in mandating masks. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Because at the time, you were operating under an emergency regulation that Department of Health had issued, correct?
Yes.
And by the way, that emergency regulation was separate and apart, independent of the governor's executive order, correct?
I don't know the exact nuances. I'm not one of the attorneys, and I wasn't the director at the time.
Okay. But as I recall, you said at the time, the reason the Department of Health didn't go through the normal regulatory process was because there just wasn't enough time. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. You said it could take 120 days to go through the process. Right?
Oh, at least 120 days. It's far more likely it would take much longer.
Right. And so if now in the future, however unlikely it may be, but there might be another respiratory virus that comes along, wouldn't it be prudent for public health officials in this state to convene the regulatory process now so that you have plenty of time to address the issues and issue a regulation?
Objection form, and then the ongoing one with speculation. Go ahead, doctor.
You're in the realm of hypothetical, and quite frankly, it's really hard to answer this. But in my humble opinion, right now it's hard for me to foresee a scenario where this could happen. But if it were to happen, we would think I would know specifics about this, previously unimagined new pathogen that you're describing here. So I really don't think there's a lot of good use of resources in trying to plan for something that may not ever occur. We already know what we've learned. We'd certainly draw on that knowledge, but I don't know what value there'd be in going through the regular public health process, which could take a year easily, about some imagined catastrophe that may never occur.
Well, Doctor, you're aware that there are public health officials and political figures in this country who want to have a mask mandate for schools starting in the fall. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that the teachers union, the NEA, has part of their platform that they're voting on this week in Chicago, asking that mandatory masking be in place in schools in communities of medium and high tier spread? Were you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Well, if that's true, if politicians and teachers unions and public health officials are thinking that it would be a good idea to have a mask mandate in the fall in schools in communities with medium and high tier spread, do you think it'd be important to go through a regulatory process beforehand, before those mandates were put in place?
Yes, if you're planning on doing a mask mandate in the fall of 22, then that clearly is not an emergency. And if that was the case, then you would go through the regular process to establish a regulation. I agree.
Okay. Now, Doctor, as part of my client's case against the state, was their concern of the potential harm to their children by mandating masks. You're aware that's the motivating factor in this lawsuit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you're aware that Judge Lanphier issued a decision back in November of last year in which he considered the harm to students and their parents, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to share with you a page, Exhibit 7. It's just 2 pages of that decision. It's a long decision, so I didn't want to put the whole thing in the record. But it starts on page 15, page 16 of that decision. Can you see this document?
Yes, I can see the document.
Okay. And as part of his analysis, the judge addressed what he calls irreparable harm, what the law calls irreparable harm. Do you see that?
I do.
You became very familiar with what the concept of irreparable harm sitting through those hearings, right?
Yes.
So the judge wrote, after pointing out what the legal standard is, he says this court heard credible testimony from multiple plaintiffs that their children were suffering adverse effects from the requirement that they wear masks throughout the school day. These adverse effects include physical and emotional discomfort and interference with the children's ability to interact with teachers and peers. Plaintiffs themselves experienced the distress of witnessing their children's discomfort, and some plaintiffs made the difficult decision to homeschool their children rather than to send them to school with masks. Did you read that statement that the judge wrote back in November of last year?
No, I did not read this statement back in November of last year.
You didn't read the decision at all?
No, I didn't read the decision. The attorneys represent the department. The attorneys read the decision. The attorneys informed me what the decision said.
Okay.
All right. Well, did you become aware in November of last year that the judge had ruled or had stated that he did find parents were suffering harm, parents and students?
Yes, the attorneys informed me of this.
Okay.
Doctor, I just,
And again, doctor, I don't want to get into any discussions that you had with the attorneys. You understand that, right? You're not going to tell me, oh, the attorneys told me this is a good ruling or a bad ruling or anything like that. I don't want to get into that. I'm just trying to get to the point where at some point you became aware of what the judge wrote, correct?
thank you, Greg.
However, you became aware of that.
Yes.
So now the judge went on to say, while not disputing plaintiff's testimony on those facts, defendants point to a lack of medical evidence on the health risks of wearing masks and state that the plaintiffs were attempting to shift their burden of proof on the issue. Then on the next page, he says, regardless of the uncertainty surrounding potential long-term medical problems resulting from mask wearing, this court finds that plaintiff's testimony regarding the ongoing impact of the mask mandate on their children suffices to establish a finding of irreparable harm. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, doctor. After you became aware of the judge's ruling on this issue, what steps did you or the Department of Health take to investigate this finding of irreparable harm because of mandating masks on these children?
We did what we said we would do. We looked for scientific literature that supported this finding.
Now, who's we?
Myself and the medical staff.
Okay. So after you found this ruling from the judge, you met with the medical staff?
As I said in this preliminary injunction hearing, we had been looking all along. We didn't stop looking, and I'm still open to it to this day.
Okay, so since November of last year, you continued to look at medical journals to see if there's anything about harm from masking. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Did you do anything other than look for medical journals?
No.
Do you recall the medical journals that you looked at?
We have an open mind. We look at all medical journals. I was open to anything I could find.
All right. How recently did you look at medical journals?
I constantly review the literature. It's part of my usual functions as a public health physician. So I'm constantly looking for new articles.
Do you know who a Tracy Beth Hoag is? Dr. Hoag? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. H-O-E-G.
No, I do not know this person.
So you're not aware that she did a study using CDC data about masking of children in schools?
Yeah, I'm not aware of this study.
How about a study by, hold on a second. Forgive me if I got. How about a study from this year? Well, face masks disrupting the holistic processing and face perception in school-age children. Did you read that study?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Did you read a study about fungal mask contamination in the COVID-19 era? Doctor?
No, I'm not familiar with this study.
Okay. Are you aware of any studies that talk about the ineffectiveness of cloth masks compared to, say, N95 masks?
Yes.
And what have you learned about the effectiveness of cloth masks to stop the spread of COVID?
They're not as effective as surgical masks or procedure masks or N95 masks or KN95 masks.
In fact, practically useless, correct?
No, I don't agree with that.
Do you have any idea what the percentage effectiveness is of cloth masks?
We discussed this in the trial. You know, the cloth masks have been studied. Some of those articles are referenced in the science brief from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It was last updated this year. So I don't know the exact number of effectiveness, but they're not as effective, as I said, as procedure masks or surgical masks, KN95s or N95 masks.
See, I'm looking at a study on the physics of fluids that was published in January of this year. So it was after our trial, our hearing. And it talks about modeling the filtration efficiency of a woven fabric mask. And it seems to conclude the efficiency rate is between 2.5% and 10%. Were you aware of this study?
No, I'm not, as I said, I'm not aware of this study. And these are studies you're talking about that seem to be in really poorly known journals. And I guess I'm not familiar with these poorly known journals.
Right. Well, can you give me one study that you've looked at that has studied the efficacy of masks in schools since November of last year?
Yeah, so as I said during the preliminary injunction hearing, I find great credibility in the Centers for Disease Control science brief. It's been updated. It's got over 80 different articles referenced in there. And, you know, it does talk about the value of cloth masks and other masks. And that's a guidance document that I find persuasive. And that's something that I've found to be useful. So that's the basis for my opinion.
So the only basis you look at is what CDC says.
I've looked for other articles. I haven't seen credible articles in other reputable journals, like I haven't seen anything in New England Journal or in the Journal of American Medical Association or in the Preventive Medicine journals or in the American Journal of Public Health or in other nationally known credible journals. I haven't seen articles address this. And there certainly are hundreds of articles published weekly on the pandemic.
Doctor, I want to now ask you about your personal views of wearing masks. Do you recall during our hearing back in October of last year, the judge asked you a question about whether wearing masks by Americans was a substantial change from past practice?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to pull up, this is Exhibit 8. And if I can figure out how to share this thing.
We have it up, Greg.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry. Oh, so all these things have been popping up. Well, I didn't even know. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm going to go to line 6. It says court, and that's Judge Lanfair. And he's asking you, you're the witness, correct? I mean, if you, well, let me put the question and answer. And if you tell me if you agree you were the witness who was answering this, okay?
Okay.
So the court says, well, so you do agree then that masks are a substantial change from past practice for many people in American society today. And the witness says, of course it is, yeah, it's not part of our culture. It's part of other cultures, but not part of ours. Were you the witness that said that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is that still your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. But you think that wearing masks should be part of our culture, right?
I think there's a role for masks in our future. Yes.
And what's that role?
It's a public health intervention. There are going to be times when it'd be helpful for people to wear masks to not spread disease to other people.
Yeah. I'm going to show you, this is Exhibit 9. Looks like, now you can't see it, but it's way up in the left. It says March 6, 2022. I think it was a Sunday Providence Journal article by Wayne Miller. Do you know who Wayne Miller is?
I do.
Okay. Did you give him an interview around the beginning of March of this year?
I don't recall. I might have.
Okay. It looks like he wrote an article about the road ahead, entering year 3 of life with COVID. 6 Rhode Islanders speculate on what, quote, normal might look like. And in this, he writes something which he attributes to you. It says, masking may also be recommended in certain situations at certain times if COVID, like the flu, experiences upticks, McDonald said. Did you say that?
Yes.
Right. Now, you didn't say if it's, I forget the exact wording, a new strain of COVID that the vaccines don't work on. You just said if there's an uptick in COVID, right?
Right.
So that's different from saying you're only going to be recommending masks in very, very unlikely event that there's some novel COVID-19 variant. I mean, that's what you testified just previously, right?
No, you're misrepresenting what I said.
Well, let me be clear, doctor. I'm sorry, you want to make an objection, Chrisanne?
Just did. I'm good. Thank you. Just
Okay.
the form, Greg. Go ahead.
Well, doctor, as I recall, you testified just previously that it seemed highly unlikely that you would be recommending a mask mandate unless there was some novel respiratory virus that there was no treatment for, that the vaccines didn't work for. Isn't that what you testified previously?
Yeah, you're either intentionally misrepresenting me or you're misrepresenting the current article you have in front of you. I really can't tell which right now.
Well, tell me how I'm misrepresenting what you
Please
said.
stop interrupting me. I'm trying to answer your question. What you talked about earlier was, would I recommend to the governor mask mandates? And I answered that question. And you were asking me about whether I would recommend to the governor specifically mask mandates. This article, which is a newspaper article, said masking may also be recommended in certain situations. It just talks about the general public. There's no use of the word mandate there. It's a media article. It doesn't mention the governor. It simply talks about recommending. These are clearly, and I mean clearly, different situations here. This is about a recommendation to the general public. Yes, absolutely. I would recommend to the general public in certain situations that they do wear masks to protect their health and health of others. But I'm sort of surprised that you draw that conclusion from this. I mean, and I'm just going to ask you, can you please remember what you're asking of me? Because you're clearly misrepresenting me in the past there. And you did that a lot during the preliminary injunction hearing. And I just think it's important to stipulate that. Please stick with the truth. This is a deposition. I'm going to be honest. I'd ask the same of you.
Okay. Well, again, just being a person of average intelligence in the medical field, if I read a statement, masking may also be recommended in certain situations, and it's being said by the director of health, I would interpret that to mean you're going to be recommending mask mandates, not recommending the wearing of masks. Do you understand the difference between those two?
Objection, form of speculation. Doctor, go ahead, answer.
You are clearly misrepresenting what I'm saying. You are clearly.
Doctor, I'm not talking about what you're, I'm not, you may have meant something different. What I'm saying is, do you understand how someone could interpret that to mean you're going to be recommending mask mandates in the future?
Objection, form, cause for speculation. Doctor, go ahead.
I disagree with you. I think you're just being argumentative at this point. Clearly, we are not talking about mandates. Clearly, mandates are not mentioned in this article. And clearly, this is different than what you're talking about. I just think you're being argumentative and difficult. Please move on.
Okay, you don't get to tell me to move on, but I will. You also said that you envisioned a possible change in culture when people who are coughing or sneezing routinely mask up when leaving their homes. Did you say that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And then you referenced your experience of living in Japan. Did you live in Japan for a period of time?
Yes, I lived there for 2 years when I was with the United States Navy. I was in Okinawa, Japan, serving as an active duty naval officer, specifically as a pediatrician at Camp Leicester, U.S. Naval Hospital, Leicester.
Okay. And apparently while you were in Japan, you noticed that people would wear masks if they had a cold and went outside. Is that what you witnessed?
It's very common in the Orient.
Okay. Well, are you saying all of the Orient or just Japan?
It was very common in Japan, very common in China, very common in other parts of the Orient. It's very common in cultures that value others more than individuals.
That's interesting. So people who don't want to wear a mask don't value others, they only value themselves. Is that what you believe?
Objection, form, speculation.
Mr. Petrelli, you did this a lot during the preliminary injunction hearing. You're clearly mischaracterizing what I'm saying here. You're clearly just trying to be argumentative and antagonistic. Quite frankly, it's not appropriate. It's unbecoming of your profession. That's not what I said.
So now you're going to tell me how to do my profession. Okay.
I'm just simply asking you to adhere to some ethical standards here and not
Doctor,
misrepresent
you know
what I
would
said.
Be ethical. You know what would be ethical would be for a medical director in the state of Rhode Island to be forthright and honest with his public statements. What would
Objection.
What would be ethical would be the head of COVID director in Rhode Island not lying to the public about 3 pediatric deaths due to COVID. You recall lying about that on the stand, doctor? And you're talking to me about ethics?
Objection, form.
You want to talk to me about ethics, doctor?
Again, the same.
I'm going to move on. That was inappropriate, and I'll ask to be stricken from the record.
Mr. Petrelli.
I am sorry. I shouldn't have said that, and I'm going to move on.
Mr.
Okay,
Petrelli.
doctor, I'm going to, unless you want to make a response, I shouldn't have said that. Go ahead.
Gentlemen,
Mr.
why don't we
Petrelli.
take a few minutes break? Everyone, please hold on for a second. Why don't we take a break for a few minutes? It would not cut into the 2.5-hour time frame. Is that agreeable to all parties?
That sounds very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. What do you recommend? I'd like to use the restroom. Does 10 minutes sound appropriate?
10 minutes would be good. Now,
Okay.
I'll ask the reporter, can we just stay on and just mute ourselves? Is that what we should do?
You said that you want to stay on the record?
No, we'll be off the record. We're off the record now.
Okay, yeah, if you'd like, if there's no objections, we can go off the record. Give me one moment. We're going off the record. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm trying to,
Going off the record at 2:52 p.m.